Hi, this is Ashley Deason, and this is my presentation for Chem 6750 about visual learning in science research and classroom application. The image on the screen is just a basic chemistry infographic that you can find by Googling images in chemistry. Looking at this image, you can see that there are lots and lots of pictures that have meanings in chemistry, but they may also have meanings in other sciences. The purpose of this assignment was to find literature that discussed visual learning in the science classroom, as well as to find implications for how this research can be applied in teaching practices. The three articles that I chose to review were Improving Teaching and Learning Through Chemistry Research by Gable, Multimedia and Understanding by Cosma and Russell, and The Impact of Embedding Multiple Modes of Representation into High School Chemistry Classrooms by McDermott and Hant. The first article by Gable, Improving Teaching and Learning, examined difficulties in learning chemistry. Specifically, it was determined that chemistry is difficult to learn because it requires symbols to demonstrate ideas at the microscopic and the macroscopic levels. This is an image that was provided in the article itself that shows the relationship between macroscopic, microscopic, and the symbols that we use in writing or communication for the ideas in chemistry. It's important that students understand that all three of these relate in order to truly learn chemistry. However, this article pointed out that this is very difficult due to the widespread use of symbols. Some examples of symbols being used in chemistry that students oftentimes find difficult to understand would be models, labs, unfamiliar compounds, or vocab. Models are difficult to understand because many of the ideas in chemistry can't be explained without a model, yet the models often use symbols within them, which just adds more cognitive difficulty to understanding the ideas in that model. Many students often say labs are fun, but teachers know that oftentimes the students don't completely get the point of the lab. This article suggests that this is because labs are being observed on the macroscopic level, yet teachers expect students to be able to take what they observed in the lab and correlate that to what's happening on the microscopic level, which is a really difficult transition for students to make. We also oftentimes use unfamiliar compound names within our chemistry labs or examples that we use. For instance, we may say acetic acid instead of vinegar. While teachers do have a purpose in using the term acetic acid, this article suggests that it may also be beneficial to start with the term vinegar because that's familiar to students and decreases their overall cognitive load for that concept. And then last, chemistry often uses vocabulary that has multiple meanings. We use words that have a common meaning as well as a scientific meaning, but oftentimes we do not take the time to make this distinction. For example, the word substance may be associated with drugs or glue or something sticky for a student, yet teachers expect students to understand that a pure substance is something like sugar or salt. So this article suggested that we should take the time to break down these barriers and misconceptions that students often find in chemistry. The second article about multimedia and understanding by Cosma and Russell had experts and novices sort cards with various chemical symbols. This image is an example of the cards that participants were asked to sort. The interesting thing about this experiment was that the cards could be in different modes of media. So this first image is actually from a video, then we have a graph, we also have an animation as well as an equation. So what this study found was that the expert participants were able to create large groups that were based on concept, as well as that the experts were able to group images across all types of media. This led the researchers to determine that the expert participants had representational competence because it did not matter the mode of representation. Novices, on the other hand, grouped their cards into much smaller groups, and the groups were based on the surface level features of the images. Further, the novice participants were only able to group across two types of media. They were not able to group past that, which is something that the researchers noted as a breakdown in the novice understanding of the concepts. Ultimately, this study found that surface level features could be used as a starting point for deeper understanding of the concepts. However, instructors should limit the types of media that are used when first introducing representations and scaffold their instruction to eventually include multiple representations of the same concept, with the learners eventually needing to determine which various representations were appropriate. So the image provided here shows the groupings by the novice participants in A and the expert participants in B. So what the researchers suggest is that we can use the surface level features of each of these various modes to eventually get the novice learners to the expert level. The last article that I reviewed was about multimodal representation, written by McDermott and Hand. In this experiment, the researchers investigated whether or not forcing students to use multiple modes of representation increased their conceptual knowledge. In this experiment, there were two groups. There was a treatment group and a control group. The treatment groups were provided with a lecture on how to use multiple modes of representation to explain their ideas, and the control groups were not provided with this lecture. However, both groups were assessed using a multiple choice question as well as writing samples. The writing samples required the students to use more than one type of representation to explain their answer. And the image provided here is the rubric that the researchers used to figure out how well the students were using their representations. So the students could create a picture, a graph, a table, a list, a diagram, or use math. And they also looked at whether or not these representations were appropriate and related to the topic. What the researchers found was that the treatment groups consistently outscored the control groups on both the multiple choice questions as well as the free response items. They also found that all students increased their ability to use the multiple modes of representation based on that scoring rubric that was used. So what this means is that if teachers require students to see and create multiple modes of representation, then it can increase the concept knowledge. So instead of just showing students multiple modes of representation, it's important to assess them on their ability to use it as well. This study also found that student ability to use multiple modes of representation increased with practice across both groups. So even though the control group wasn't explicitly taught how to use multiple modes of representation, their ability to use it increased throughout the study. So the image I provided to the right is something that I think most chemistry teachers would both want and expect their students to understand in terms of Boyle's law. So the first image is a representation of the mathematical relationship between pressure and volume. The second image is a drawing showing that if we increase the pressure, then we decrease the volume. And the last is a graph showing the same inverse relationship. Ultimately, what this study provided information about was if we can both introduce as well as require students to use these multiple modes of representation for the same idea, then their conceptual knowledge will increase. Overall, these three articles together stressed that symbols are crucial for understanding chemistry. So looking back at this image, chemistry teachers would understand that students need to know that while this is just a picture of an atom, it's not an accurate picture. Some of these are safety symbols. We generally don't have various colored things in our test tubes You wouldn't have a distillation flask not hooked up to anything, etc. So symbols are crucial for understanding chemistry, and it's important for teachers to stress that importance. Further, students often get lost in learning the symbols or understanding the models because they too are made up of more symbols. So looking back at this image, looking at the atom, you would need to know that the center is the nucleus, these rings are part of the cloud, and the red is meant to introduce the electrons. That's 3 symbols within this one symbol, and so it's important for teachers to really break down the different symbols that we're using, whether it be in picture form or something like a chemical formula. Further, it's important for us to allow students to determine patterns and use this as a tool to connect it to deeper meaning. While students finding patterns on their own is initially an increase in their cognitive load, it's opening up new pathways to their current schema so that we can connect it to the deeper concepts as we teach. And last, the implications of this research tell us that we should scaffold in use of multiple representations, both in our lectures as well as our assessments. It's not enough for teachers to just teach with multiple modes of representation, but we should also work to assess our students on their use of representations in chemistry in order to increase their competency. If you're interested in reading more, here's the works cited for the 3 specific articles that I used, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you.